So, Silent Hill, right? Foggy towns, cults, unspeakable horrors, Norman Reedus. I love it, you love it, it's thebomb.com. Which one's your favorite? Oh, Silent Hill 2? Bro, that's also my fave. I mean, that seems to be the top pick for many fans, with usually 3 and 1 following closely behind. For good reason, too. The first 3 games are certified hood classics and are rightfully argued to be the best that survival horror has to offer. These installments could be considered the golden age of Silent Hill, before Konami pulled a Konami and ruined everything with the endless lame sequels that happened after it. Silent Hill 4 is interesting because while not considered a part of the great Silent Hill slopfest, it's also not a game that I would feel comfortable grouping together with its prequels, despite it also being developed by Team Silent. It was their last game for the series before being disbanded by the metaphorical man. You could look at it as a swan song, not only for the devs, but also for the franchise itself, because we can just pretend all the other games don't exist. Well, except for Downpour. That one's kind of cool. I don't actually know if Team Silent knew Konami was gonna fuck them over after the release of this game, but if they did, maybe that's why they felt the need to switch up the formula and try new ideas in this entry. It feels quite different from the previous 3 games and changes what we know about Silent Hill in an interesting way. Now, would it have been a better game if they just didn't? Yeah, probably. As it is, all the changes made to Silent Hill 4 makes the game not the most fun to play. It's very unorthodox, and if I'm being completely honest, I hated most of my playthrough. So why make a video on a game I probably should have dropped and went on about my life? It's because only through hate playing and trusting that Team Silent knows what they're doing did I come to somewhat appreciate this wonky ass game. It's rare that my opinion on a game changes, much less does a complete 180, and even when it does, it's never mid-playthrough. This is the first, so I just wanted to share how this experience went. Silent Hill 4 tells the story of a man trapped in his dirty, stinky-ass apartment, which I'm sure is a reflection of himself rather than any paranormal entities that may or may not have influence over his humble abode. This is Henry, and he is probably the most boring protagonist I've played as. I literally could not tell you a single character trait this man has, but hey, at least he's pretty. He's low-key giving Beck from Victorious. Anyway, one day after waking up, Henry finds his front door mysteriously chained up and none of his electronics functioning. Something that I'm sure would make me freak the fuck out, but Henry seems to take it like a champ. This is just another day for him. He starts receiving little notes and memos from under the door and behind his bookshelf, and after 5 days, a thought-provoking hole appears in the bathroom wall. And no, to our dismay, it is not a glory hole. This human-sized hole, Henry quickly realizes, is a magical human-sized hole, capable of transporting our human-sized Henry to otherworldly places. Obviously, this has something to do with whatever is preventing us from leaving our apartment. Thus begins Henry's many, many hole expeditions, with each trip enlarging the esoteric orifice by a smidge. I call this phenomena the gapening. It's at this point where the player finally gets out of the first-person room mode and gets a feel for the third-person mode that they will spend most of the game in. And they will soon realize that it is just as uncomfortable to play as Henry looks. Bro stands like he's in the kitchen about to ask his mom what's for dinner. The very first thing I noticed while playing, and what I think may be the biggest crime this game commits, is the lack of tank controls. At this point, everyone should know that I am a staunch tank control advocate. So when I play 5th and 6th gen survival horror games and I don't have tankies, I become livid for the entire playthrough. Because there's no fucking reason why Henry should have a stroke every time the camera angles change. Especially when I'm trying to get his slow ass away from danger. The control confusion thing happens way more than it needs to, and with no option to even turn on tank controls for an infinitely better experience, it leads me to wonder whose idea was it to change this, because it literally makes no sense. After going through the 5 stages of grief over a control scheme, I finally get to the point where I come across my first enemy, only to realize that the combat itself sucks almost as bad as moving around. Like, more than usual. I know the Silent Hill series isn't known for having the best combat systems known to man, but for the most part, they're functional. Silent Hill 4 is the only one I've played where the combat actually feels bad. I quickly learned that I'd much rather just take my chances and run past everything rather than trying to fight, which is generally how I play classic Resident Evil games, but this game feels like it wants you to kill enemies, except for the ghost enemies that are invulnerable and can damage Henry just by being near him. And here I thought my social anxiety was bad. This dude literally dies when he's around other people. That's crazy. Team Silent tried to make the combat just a little more complex, adding a cute little charging mechanic for your melee attacks that's pretty good for knocking back opponents, assuming you don't get hit first before you unleash it. The whole thing just feels very awkward. Half of the swings that look like they're in range fail to connect. The dodging mechanic is kind of booty, and I honestly don't think it's possible to run past any group of dogs in the game and not get bit. In the beginning, I tried to not be too critical of this because I fully expected to get my hands on a glick and start blasting on fools, which was totally not the case. Silent Hill 4 is absolutely melee focused, and this is due to the next big change. For the first time, we have limited inventory space. Henry has but so many pockets on his person, so it makes sense for him to only be able to hold a handful of items. Under normal circumstances, I would be all for this. However, the way it was implemented leaves me confused. So you have 10 item slots total, and these slots will be taken up by the usual: weapons, key items, ammo, first aid kits, and the like. Ammo is interesting because it doesn't stack at all. Bullets will quickly clog your inventory, preventing you from picking up other items, especially since there's no dropping and coming back later for it in this game. Mind you, some of the enemies are quite spongy, so even carrying a gun just in case is a huge inconvenience to the player, causing them to constantly go back and forth from the other worlds and the room, as that's where the only item box in the game is located. In the beginning, this didn't annoy me much, but there's only so much tunnel loading screens I can tolerate before I just banish all my guns to the item box for life. And finally, this brings us to the room itself. As you would imagine, with Henry being stuck in his apartment, you will spend lots of time here. While you're in the room, you play in first person, which I actually really dig, and I believe was one of the cool selling points for the game. I've read that a lot of people find that the first-person segments happen to be the scariest the game and arguably even the series has to offer, and I'm inclined to agree with this. The first person obscures much more than a third-person view could, and paired with Akira Yamaoka's genius sound design, it makes for a not-so-pleasant experience in a good way. However, outside of a few scares here and there wasn't much to do. Sometimes a secret admirer would slide notes under my door and I would watch my daily reruns of the Eileen show, but besides that, I was frustrated with the lack of things to do in the room. I mean, the game's subtitle is named after it, but all I can do here is look out the window, save, and use the item box. I know the phone is used for a puzzle or two, but I just kind of wish this little hub area was utilized a little bit more, rather than it just serving as a save room, especially considering how many times you have to go back to it over the course of the game. The other worlds are also lacking in the depth department. The subway and forest worlds are honestly some of the most uninteresting survival horror locations I've ever encountered in all my years of gaming. These levels are quite straightforward and both lack puzzles of any kind unless you want to count the train maze. I was fearful that the rest of the game may continue this trend, which honestly felt like how I would imagine a Silent Hill licensed mobile game would play like. Could it be that Team Silent got lost in the sauce? The water prison is a step up. It's definitely my favorite area you visit in the game, and certainly one of my favorites in the series, next to the Lakeside Amusement Park and the house from PT if you want to count that. There's just something about this ethereal ass prison in the middle of some ocean that gets me going, man. Shout out to the winding stairs, but only the ones outside the building because the ones inside have those annoying wall people. The water prison is also home to the most notorious enemy in the franchise. Twin Wardens are absolutely horrifying, and I do not fuck with them in the slightest. They are erratic as hell, and I don't really appreciate the fact that they point at you before charging in. It's just rude. You would think that their monster mommy would teach them that, but here we are. Oh. These new enemy types make exploring the prison a lot more tense than the previous two areas, especially as this is the first one that actually feels like a Silent Hill level. There are plenty of rooms to check, backs to track, and holy shit, 3 hours into this damn game and we finally have a puzzle. This was certainly the turning point for me when it came to my opinion on this game. Just before, I was fully expecting to drop it, but decided to trust the process, and although this level still wasn't enough for me to fall head over heels for Silent Hill 4, it was a good start. Definitely got me interested to find out if the boys could keep the momentum going. It was during the final-ish 2 sections that things start coming together. The Otherworld is finally giving Otherworld. The building and the apartment worlds feel like they could have been lifted from the other games. The latter especially, as we've been there and done that, but I guess you kind of have to let us explore the apartment building in a game about a guy trapped in his apartment, so I'll give him a pass for that. It feels so right making my way through dilapidated corridors filled with walls that would probably give me tetanus if I rub against them accidentally. I like the touch in the apartment world where you can stick the notes you find under the door to your apartment so that you can pick them up and read them like the other memos in the real world. It's not at all necessary, but it does provide context as to what's going on. And speaking of the plot, this is about where the game decides that instead of having the player wander through strange worlds with almost no rhyme or reason, it should probably start having things happen plot-wise. Prior to this point, all we really know is that in these other worlds we see a continuation of some presumed deceased serial killer's plan to murder 21 randos in order to bring about paradise, a place where no one suffers. How ironic. Although the people we see murdered thus far have nothing to do with us, things get a little more personal when our next door bestie Eileen, who we stalk through a hole in our shared wall, turns out to be more essential to this sick ritual than she or her Robbie the Rabbit plush has let on. Rather than moseying along as we did before, we now have a newfound sense of urgency as the girl we stalk but never speak to is now targeted by the game's antagonist, Walter, which I think is a super boring name to give a serial killer. It's not very fitting. I still feel like I'm just getting script scraps of plot, but gone are my feelings of, I don't know what the hell is going on and I low-key don't care. Now I'm at, okay, this is going somewhere and I'm vaguely interested. It's not where I want it to be as the game still plays like shit and is overly simplistic, but we can work with this. Towards the end of the apartment world, you find a wounded Eileen and some kid who should probably be in bed right about now. When you make your way back to the real world, Eileen, who is thankfully still alive, is being taken to the hospital. Not only are things changing outside the apartment, but inside you realize that your magic hole has been sealed up. The gaping has ended, but there is still adventure to be had. Eileen is gone, and we can assume Walter is probably still after her. With the once seemingly useless tablets you collected at the end of each level, we open a new hole in our laundry room to traverse through. I know our landlord hates us. This new hole transports us to a hospital where we come across a bloodlusting Walter, overly freaked out, might I add. All of our encounters with this guy thus far have been pretty mild, so much that this scene just catches you so off guard with how unsettling it is. But you know, in addition to what I just witnessed, this place is kind of peak. It doesn't really have that traditional survival horror level design, as it's more or less a gallery of fucked up rooms to look through. It has enemies that burp when you hit them. And also the hallway to end all hallways. Each room guarded by paranormal wheelchairs and filled with horrors beyond your imagination. This was easily my favorite part of the game. Like, if the whole game could just be the hospital, I might actually have Silent Hill 4 as my favorite in the series. This is such a 180 from the worlds before it. They really nailed the atmosphere here. Eventually, you find Eileen, and together you both escape this hellscape back into the real world. That's a cool way of saying you get to do an escort mission back to the start of the level. And through the hole we go to safety. Rather than the end credits scrolling after you and your next door neighbor high-five, you are back at your apartment. The chains are still on your door and the day has not been saved. You are still being bombarded by memos and there's still a huge gaping hole in your laundry room. Going back through it, you not only find yourself back in the hospital, but realize that Eileen is stuck in these other worlds. Saving her is not going to be as simple as venturing through the hole together. She's also feeling a little off. That may or may not have anything to do with some curse that was placed upon her, but we don't have time to worry about that now. The only thing we can do is push onward and get to the root of all this Walter shit. After waltzing into the depths of the hospital, which pretty much consists of whatever this is, you reach the gateway, if you will, that connects all of the other worlds together. A spiral staircase that's quite foggy and spooky, reminiscent of Silent Hill itself. This is where the true game begins. During the first half, the main issue that I had was that the game was too simple. The level designs were too straightforward, there were no puzzles, and nothing really keeping me invested plot-wise. And the combat was fucking stupid. That last part totally doesn't change, however there are a few changes from this point forward that make things a little more interesting. Now, should they have been a part of the game to begin with? Probably. I think it would be better that way, but whatever. For the second half of the game, you must guide Henry through all 5 other worlds again, but this time with Eileen in tow, with her broken-ass arm and sprained ankle that makes her move annoyingly slow. At least she can fight back, so she gets points over Ashley Graham. Alongside her physical handicaps, Eileen is also cursed or something. You're basically racing against the clock through this nightmare gauntlet. This isn't super apparent during the start of the second half, but trust me, the longer you take, the more you'll realize that something is not right with your girl. This hoe is crazy as hell. If you leave her alone, or if she takes damage, she goes totally bonkers sooner. There's like an invisible possession bar that slowly fills as you neglect her. So it's important to keep her close and keep things moving. Unless you really don't care about her, then I guess you can just fuck around and let her die. She has the personality of a slice of bread, so I wouldn't blame you for that. Your apartment has changed as well. First off, going to your apartment doesn't heal you anymore. This is no longer a safe space for Henry, and if the lack of healing wasn't sign of this enough, then the hauntings will definitely drive that message home. Occasionally, there will be sections of your apartment that will be haunted by ghosts or something. Basically, you have to use the candles you find in the other worlds to exorcise the ghosts in order to keep your apartment safe-ish. These hauntings will drain your health when you go near them, and if you ignore them, eventually they will be everywhere. And this game doesn't have a bunch of healing items to begin with, so it's best to keep them in check every time you visit. The hauntings cleared also contribute to the ending you get when you finish the game. Fun fact. Usually, through exploring, they give you just enough candles and paranormal repelling pendants to clear out every haunting. But I think during my playthrough I might have missed just one, due to using a candle or two to heal Eileen. When you begin the wraparound, you realize that although the worlds haven't changed physically, the way you progress through each one is slightly more complicated. There are key items to grab, backs to track, and sometimes you even have to leave Eileen by herself, as there are some places she can't get to with her arm broken. Walter's victims from the first go-around come back as ghost bosses that follow you throughout the entire level, terrorizing Henry and Eileen. They are indeed annoying as fuck, but there's the Sword of Obedience that you can use to pin those suckers down so you can do what you gotta do. I totally missed one of them, so during the building world I had to deal with this guy bothering me the whole time. Not super fun. I feel like I'm forgetting another change. Oh yeah, Walter is here and he has a fucking gun. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the second half, and if I'm keeping it G real with you, I am loving it. Why couldn't the whole game just be the second half? Why do I have to push through 4 to 5 hours of mid just to start having fun? I've been asking myself this question every day since I finished the game. With this second half, literally all my issues have been solved. Except for the combat. I'm afraid that's still shit, but you get what I mean. You would think that making half of the game an escort mission, especially with someone as slow and fragile as Eileen, would ruin the game, but it only enhances it. It doesn't necessarily make the game more challenging, but having more to do than just running around through each level allows me to better appreciate the atmosphere and story instead of focusing on how much the game blows. It turns what honestly felt like a mobile Silent Hill game into, hey, they took a chance to do some weird shit and I kind of see the vision. The story, once incoherent and honestly not at all interesting, started to come together. Walter is quite an interesting villain, and the whole story centers around him and his shenanigans. It kind of takes a while to get going, but I think being drip-fed context as to what's happening throughout the first half was a good way to set up the introduction of Walter himself. Through reading memos, glimpses of both adult and child Walter, and the red writing we can now read thanks to Eileen, you learn more about his little origin story, his ties to the Order, the 21 Sacraments, and all that good shit. He's certainly the most interesting antagonist Silent Hill has to offer. A troubled childhood filled with abuse and the crazy teachings of a cult, leading him to grow into a cynical homicidal maniac who just wants to be with his mommy. Obviously, murdering multiple people probably isn't the best way to go about it, but I can't help but sympathize with the character. He's very much a product of his environment. I'm sure there's some hour-long character analysis on Bro that I should watch somewhere. This is probably the only game I have immediately disliked, hate-played it, and ultimately came out of it with respect for and somehow enjoyment from the experience as a whole. It's weird as fuck and super unconventional, but I kind of dig it. My faith in Team Silent is honestly what got me through it, because trust me, if this was developed by anyone else, I would have dropped it in a heartbeat. Silent Hill 4 is a grower, not a shower, and that's okay with me. It still kind of sucks to play, but on the whole, it was worth my time. Just this once though, because I will never replay it. Ever. It's certainly not my favorite Silent Hill game. That goes to Silent Hill Book of Memories for the PlayStation Vita, but it's well worth the price of admission, being just a few bucks on GOG. I definitely recommend playing it if you haven't already. Don't even wait for a remake, because I'm sure Konami won't touch this with a 10-foot pole. So, get it while it's hot.